Sometimes you spend years telling yourself that the person who raised you must have your best interests at heart, even when every instinct screams otherwise. You keep showing up, keep giving, keep believing the story they built around you. Then, one ordinary afternoon, the story cracks open, and you realize the ground you've been standing on was never solid to begin with. If you've ever had someone you trusted rewrite your entire reality with a single message, you already know how fast the world can tilt. My name is Lauren Ellis. I am 30 years old. I had come to Whispering Pines, this high-end private haven, tucked into the rolling hills of Northern California because I finally needed space that belonged only to me. 3 weeks of silence yoga at sunrise, and no one asking me to fix their problems or explain why I hadn't called in 2 days. The cabin was simple, in the way that costs a lot of money. Wide windows, a private deck, a bed that felt like it had been made for someone who actually rested. I had used every last dollar I could scrape together to be here telling myself that choosing myself for once wasn't selfish. It was necessary. The email arrived while I was still in my hiking clothes, sitting on the edge of that expensive bed. The subject line was polite and final at the same time: notice of removal from the Ellis Family Trust. Effective immediately. My hands went cold before I even clicked it open. Inside was a letter from a lawyer I had never met, Michael Grant, followed by a shorter note written in my mother's familiar looping handwriting. She had removed me. No more access, no more monthly transfers, no explanation beyond one line that felt like it had been dictated by someone else. After careful consideration with Diane, we have decided your recent choices demonstrate a continued lack of appreciation for everything that has been provided to you. Diane Harper, the woman who had sat at our kitchen table every Thanksgiving since I was 8, who had helped my mother pick out my prom dress, who had once called me her bonus daughter. The same Diane who had started spending more and more time at my mother's house. These last 2 years, always arriving with little gifts and leaving with quiet conversations behind closed doors. My mother's note mentioned a family photo as part of the evidence that had changed everything. I scrolled down and found the attached image, my mother and Diane, standing in front of a bright white beach house with the ocean glittering behind them. My mother had been posting versions of this photo for months, captioning them with things like "the family's new beginning" and proof that hard work pays off. I downloaded the file and checked the metadata, the way anyone does when something suddenly feels wrong. The creation date was from 4 years earlier. The GPS coordinates pointed to a stretch of coast in Oregon, not the Florida location my mother had claimed. The photo wasn't new. It had been cropped and reused, turned into proof of a fortune that apparently existed only in stories. I stood up so quickly the room tilted. I paced the length of the cabin 3 times before I even realized I was moving. Every promise my mother had made over the last 5 years started flashing through my head, in fragments the family money that would eventually take care of both of us. The investments she said she was making with the money I sent her every month. The beach house that was supposedly being built for when I was ready to come home for good. I had skipped a promotion last year because she said she couldn't handle the stress of me being busier. I had paid for her roof repairs and her car and the new furniture she needed to feel like the house was finally ours. I had done it all because she had made me believe there was something bigger waiting, something we were building together. My phone vibrated on the bed. A text from my mother. "I hope your little retreat is worth it. Diane and I had a long talk last night. It's time you learned what it means to stand on your own. Don't expect anything else from me until you can show some real gratitude." Gratitude. The word landed like a stone in my chest. I typed back before I could talk myself out of it. "Mum, what is this? The trust that photo. Can we please just talk for 5 minutes?" The reply came in under a minute. "There's nothing left to talk about. You made your choice when you ran off to play at being independent. Diane helped me see that clearly. You've always been the difficult one. This is for your own good. Difficult one." She had called me that when I was 12 and wanted to spend weekends at the library instead of reorganizing her closets for the third time that month. She had called me that when I moved into my first apartment at 22. She had called me that every single time I tried to put even an inch of space between her needs and my life. And now she was using it as the reason to cut me off completely, with Diane standing right beside her in the decision. I called her. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. She answered on the second ring, her voice already tight. Lauren, I don't have time for this right now. Mum, you removed me from the trust. You sent a lawyer after me. What is going on? There was a pause. Then her voice shifted into that familiar mix of wounded and sharp that always made my stomach clench. I'm protecting what little we have left. You think I don't know you've been pulling away? You think I don't see how you look at me every time you visit? Like I'm some burden you can't wait to escape. Diane has been the only one who's been honest with me about how selfish you've become. Selfish. The word came out louder than I meant. I've been driving 2 hours every weekend for years. I've paid for things you said you couldn't afford. I skipped my own career moves because you said you needed me. And now I'm selfish because I came somewhere to breathe for 3 weeks. You came somewhere expensive, she snapped. While I'm sitting here trying to hold everything together, Diane said you would do this. She said once you got a taste of freedom, you'd forget who made it possible. I could hear Diane's voice in the background, low and calm, saying something I couldn't make out. My mother's tone changed again, softening into something almost gentle. Honey, I love you. This is hard for me too. But sometimes love means teaching hard lessons. Diane helped me understand that. The whiplash of her voice, angry, then wounded, then gentle, then cutting again, made my head spin. I had heard this pattern my entire life, but it had never felt this fast or this final. I tried one more time, my own voice cracking. Mum, that photo you sent. It's from 4 years ago. The metadata shows it. There is no new beach houses there never was. The line went quiet for a long second. When she spoke again, her voice was ice. You always have to dig, don't you? You can't just accept that some things are private. Diane was right. You don't trust me. You never have. Mum, don't bother calling again until you're ready to apologize for the way you've treated me. And for the record, Diane is handling the paperwork now. I don't need the stress. The call ended. I stood in the middle of the cabin with the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone like it might explain what had just happened. My chest felt too tight and too empty at the same time. The chaos in my head was loud rage at the lie guilt for the way my voice had risen, fear of what came next, and underneath it all, a strange cold clarity that this moment had been coming for a long time. I walked out onto the deck. The afternoon light was soft through the oak trees. Sophia Ramirez was on the path below, carrying a yoga mat and a water bottle. She looked up, saw my face, and stopped. Lauren, you look like the world just ended. I tried to laugh, and it came out wrong. Family stuff. My mother decided today was the day to cut me off from everything, with a little help from her best friend. Sophia set her mat down and came closer. She didn't ask for details right away. She just stood there, giving me space to decide how much to say. In that moment, I realized I had spent so many years keeping my mother's chaos inside that I had almost forgotten what it felt like to have someone simply stand beside me while it spilled out. I think the money was never real, I said finally. I think she's been using the idea of it to keep me close. And now that I tried to take even a little space for myself, she used it as the excuse to let me go. Sophia was quiet for a moment. That's a lot to carry alone. You don't have to figure it all out tonight. I nodded, but my mind was already racing ahead. I needed the full trust documents. I needed to understand exactly what had been taken and what, if anything, had ever been there. I needed to know how much of my life had been shaped around a story Diane Harper had helped my mother tell. Back inside the cabin, I opened my laptop and started searching for the lawyer's name. Michael Grant had a small firm in the city. His website was clean and professional. I drafted an email asking for a copy of the removal paperwork and any supporting documents. My fingers hesitated over the send button. Once I sent it, there would be no pretending this wasn't real. I hit send anyway, then I turned my phone off completely. I needed one night where my mother's voice and Diane's quiet influence couldn't reach me. I needed to sit with the truth that the person I'd spent 30 years trying to please had decided I was no longer worth the effort, and that she had let someone else help her reach that decision. Outside, the light was fading into that soft California dusk. I sat on the deck with a blanket around my shoulders and let the chaos inside me settle into something heavier. I had come here looking for peace. What I had found instead was the first honest look at how much of my life had been built on someone else's performance. Tomorrow I would have to decide what came next. Tonight I just had to keep breathing through the knowledge that the woman who gave me life had just used it as leverage to push me away. The next morning, the pine-scented air still felt heavy as I stepped out onto the deck with a mug of coffee that had gone cold in my hands. I had barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the metadata timestamp on that beach photo and heard my mother's voice shifting from wounded to cutting to almost gentle in the space of one phone call. The chaos in my chest hadn't settled. It had just rearranged itself into something sharper, something that kept asking how many years I had spent believing a story that was never mine to begin with. I went to the morning yoga session anyway, mostly because staying in the cabin felt like letting the silence win. Sofia Ramirez was already there, rolling out her mat near the back of the sunlit studio. She caught my eye and gave a small nod, the kind that said she remembered our conversation from the night before without needing to say it out loud. During the final savasana, I felt my mind drifting again, pulling up old memories I had tried to keep buried. My mother telling me at 16 that college was a waste of money because family comes first and I need you here. The way she had cried when I took my first real job 2 states away, then called every night for weeks until I started sending money home to help with the bills she couldn't manage alone. The quiet satisfaction in her voice whenever I cancelled plans with friends because she needed me for something. I had called it love for so long that the word itself felt slippery now. After class, Sophia waited for me by the juice bar. "You don't have to talk about it if you're not ready," she said, handing me a green smoothie I hadn't asked for. "But if you want to walk the trail behind the cabins, I'm free until the sound bath at 10. We walked. The path wound through oak trees and low ferns, the kind of quiet that usually calmed me. Today, it only made the noise in my head louder. I told her more than I had planned to, about the trust removal, about the photo metadata that proved the beach house was a lie from 4 years ago, about Diane Harper, the woman who had braided my hair as a child and was now apparently the one helping my mother decide I was no longer worth keeping close. Sophia listened without interrupting. When I finally stopped talking, she said it sounds like she's been building a version of you that only exists to serve her. And now that you stepped outside, she's rewriting the story, so you're the problem. Hearing it said out loud by someone who had no stake in the old narrative made something shift inside me. Not peace, not yet, but a steadier kind of anger, the kind that didn't burn out in 5 minutes. Back in the cabin, my laptop pinged with a new email. Michael Grant, the lawyer, whose name had appeared on the removal notice, had replied. The message was short and professional. He had attached the full trust documents and a copy of the correspondence that led to my removal. I opened the files with hands that wouldn't quite stay still. The trust itself was smaller than I had been led to believe. Most of the deposits over the last 8 years had come from me transfers I had made when my mother said she was short on property taxes or needed help with the investments that will eventually take care of both of us. There were also regular payments listed to Diane Harper for financial consulting services. The amounts weren't huge, but they added up. And then there was an email chain from 6 months earlier. Diane had written to my mother, suggesting that Lauren's increasing independence may require us to protect the remaining assets by formalizing a removal from the trust if she continues to prioritize her own life over family obligations. My mother had replied 2 days later with a single line, "Do what you think is best." She's always been difficult. I read it twice. The words didn't feel real at first. Then they did. And the chaotic swirl in my chest narrowed into something cold and clear. Diane hadn't just supported the decision. She had proposed it, and my mother had agreed without hesitation. My phone rang before I could close the laptop. My mother's name lit up the screen. I almost let it go to voicemail. Instead, I answered. "Lauren," she said, and her voice was already tight. "I got a call from Michael Grant. He said you're asking for documents. Why are you doing this? Because you removed me from the trust with no warning and used a 4-year-old photo as evidence, I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt, because I want to understand what was actually there. There was family, she snapped. There was loyalty. There was a mother who sacrificed everything so her daughter could have opportunities. And you repaid that by running off to some overpriced retreat the second things got hard. Hard for who? The words came faster now. I've been the one sending money every month. I've been the one cancelling my own plans. The photo you sent isn't real. The beach house isn't real. How much of the story you told me was actually Diane's idea? The line went quiet for a beat. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted into that wounded register she used when she wanted me to feel guilty. Diane has been the only person who stood by me while you pulled away. She sees how much this has hurt me. She helped me realize that keeping you in the trust was only enabling your selfishness. Selfishness, I repeated. The word tasted bitter. Is that what you call it when I finally do one thing for myself after years of doing everything for you? You don't get to play the victim now, she said, her voice rising. Diane warned me you would twist this. She said you've always had a way of making me look like the bad guy. I'm done defending myself to you. I could hear Diane's voice in the background again, low and steady feeding lines I couldn't quite catch. My mother's breathing changed. When she spoke next, the gentleness was back, the one that always came right before the final cut. I love you, Lauren, but love doesn't mean letting someone drain you forever. Diane helped me see that clearly. If you keep pushing, you're only going to make this worse for both of us. Worse for who I asked. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you and Diane have already decided I'm the problem and moved on. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, don't contact me again until you're ready to apologize. And don't drag Diane into this. She's been more of a daughter to me these last few years than you have. The call ended. I sat on the edge of the bed, with the phone still in my hand, the document still open on the laptop screen. The chaos was back louder than before, anger at the lie, grief for the years I had spent believing it, and underneath it, a rising determination that felt almost dangerous. I had spent my whole life trying to be the daughter she wanted. Now she had decided that daughter no longer existed, and she had let Diane help her erase me from the paperwork that was supposed to protect us both. I forwarded the email chain to my own secure folder and then to Sophia because I needed at least one person who could confirm I wasn't imagining the words on the screen. Then I stood up and started packing. The decision formed before I had fully thought it through. I couldn't stay here, pretending the world outside these trees hadn't just shifted. I needed to look my mother in the eye and ask her in person how long she had been planning this with Diane. I needed to hear her say it without the buffer of a phone line. I was zipping the last bag when another email from Michael Grant arrived. The subject line was simple, follow up on trust removal. The body was even simpler. He had reviewed everything I had sent and confirmed that the removal was legally complete. Any challenge would require proving undue influence or fraud, which would take months, if not years, and would almost certainly cost more than whatever remained in the trust. He also noted that several recent transfers appeared to have moved assets into accounts connected to Diane Harper. He ended with one line that landed like a stone. Given the documentation, a prolonged legal fight may not yield the outcome you're hoping for and could permanently close any remaining family channels. I read it 3 times. The documents had already shown me the truth. Now the lawyer was telling me what fighting for it would actually cost. Not just money, not just time. The last fragile thread of the relationship I had spent 30 years trying to hold together. I sat back down on the bed. The cabin that had felt like a sanctuary 2 days ago now felt like a waiting room. Outside the window, the oak trees swayed in the afternoon light. Sophia texted, asking if I wanted company for the evening sound bath. I didn't answer right away. My mind was moving too fast, jumping between the urge to drive straight to my mother's house and demand answers, and the colder realization that even if I did, even if I showed her the emails and the metadata and the payment records to Diane, she might still choose the version of the story that kept her comfortable. And Diane would be right there to reinforce it. The choice was already forming, quiet and heavy. I could keep pushing, keep demanding the truth in public, keep trying to force her to see what she had done. or I could accept that the woman who raised me had already decided I was no longer worth the effort. Take what little clarity the documents had given me and walk away before I lost whatever was left of myself in the fight. Neither option felt like winning. Both of them felt like losing something I wasn't ready to name yet. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Diane Harper herself. Short, direct. Your mother is under enough stress. If you care about her at all, you'll let this go before it gets uglier than it already is. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. The chaos inside me had narrowed into something colder and more deliberate. I closed the laptop. I picked up my bag, and I made the call I had been avoiding since the email from Michael Grant arrived. The next morning I stayed at Whispering Pines instead of driving back. The decision formed slowly while I sat on the deck with another cold cup of coffee and watched the light move across the oak trees. Going to my mother's house in person would only give her more power to twist the moment into another story about how unstable I had become. I needed to have the conversation from a place where I could hang up if the chaos became too much. Sophia sat with me for a while, without pushing. When I told her what I was planning, she simply said, "You don't owe her a performance. You only owe yourself the truth." I set up the video call from the small desk in my cabin. My mother answered on the second ring, Diane Harper, visible in the background at the kitchen table, sorting through papers like she belonged there. My mother's face looked tired and defensive at the same time. "Lauren," she said before I could speak, "I told you not to contact me until you were ready to apologize." "I'm not calling to apologize," I said. My voice stayed level even though my chest felt tight. "I'm calling because I have the documents from Michael Grant. The ones that show most of the money in the trust came from me over the years. The ones that show Diane has been receiving payments for consulting while you told me we were building something together." Diane looked up from the papers but didn't speak. My mother's expression flickered surprise, then the quick shift into wounded anger I had seen my whole life. "You went behind my back to a lawyer," she said, her voice rising. "After everything I've done for you, you dragged strangers into our family business and then accused me of lying. The metadata on the beach photo proves it was taken 4 years ago," I continued. "The trust records show you moved assets into accounts connected to Diane. I'm not asking you to explain it anymore. I'm telling you I see it now." My mother laughed, a short, sharp sound that didn't reach her eyes. "See what that I finally protected myself from a daughter who only calls when she wants something. Diane has been here every day while you were off at your fancy retreat. She's the one who helped me understand that you were never going to be grateful, no matter what I gave you." Diane leaned forward slightly, her voice calm and reasonable. "Patricia, maybe we should end this call. Lauren is clearly upset and it's not good for your blood pressure." The way she said my mother's name like she had earned the right to manage her made something final click into place inside me. My mother had let this woman become the gatekeeper to our relationship, and she was using that position to keep me out. "I'm not upset," I said, and for the first time the words felt true. "I'm done. I'm done sending money. I'm done rearranging my life around stories that were never real. I'm done letting you and Diane decide who I am." My mother's face changed again. The anger dropped away and something closer to panic took its place. "You can't just walk away like this. I am your mother. We have history," Diane said. "If you kept pushing, we might have to involve someone to make sure you don't harass us. Is that what you want? To turn this into something ugly?" There it was, the threat dressed up as concern. The same pattern she had used since I was a child. "Love me, or I will make you the problem." Only now Diane was the one writing the lines. I looked at the screen, at my mother's face, and Diane sitting just behind her, like a shadow that had finally stepped into the light. I thought about all the years I had spent trying to be the daughter who deserved the version of her that only existed in her stories. The version that would one day hand me keys to a beach house that had never been real. "I'm not going to fight you for something that was mostly mine to begin with," I said. "I'm not going to spend years in court proving what these documents already show, but I am going to stop pretending this is still a relationship. If you ever decide the truth matters more than whatever story you and Diane are telling each other, you know where to find me. Until then, I'm done." My mother opened her mouth, then closed it. For a second, she looked like the woman who used to braid my hair when I was small. Then the mask slid back into place. "You've always been difficult," she said quietly. Diane tried to warn me. I should have listened sooner. The call ended. I sat in the cabin with the blank screen in front of me and let the silence settle. No explosion, no dramatic last words. Just the quiet click of a door closing that had been open for 30 years. Sophia knocked softly a few minutes later. She didn't ask what happened. She just brought tea and sat on the deck with me while the light faded. "You okay?" she asked eventually. "I think I will be," I said, and I meant it, even though my chest still ached with the weight of what I'd lost. Not money, not a house that never existed. The idea that my mother had ever been capable of loving me without conditions. That illusion had been the real thing I'd been holding on to, and now it was gone. I extended my stay at Whispering Pines by 2 weeks. The days fell into a rhythm that felt almost foreign yoga. At sunrise, long walks on the trails, conversations with Sophia that didn't require me to explain or defend or fix anything. Michael Grant sent one final email confirming that the trust removal was complete, and that any further action on my part would be costly and unlikely to change the outcome. I thanked him and let it go. There was nothing left in those documents worth destroying myself to claim. The ironic part arrived slowly like a punchline that took days to land. By cutting me off, my mother had actually freed herself from the only real obligation she had left, the quiet understanding that I would keep sending money because I still believed in the story she told. Diane had helped her see that. And in doing so, Diane had also helped me see that there had never been a fortune waiting at the end of my loyalty. There had only been the slow transfer of my own resources into someone else's hands, while I kept waiting to be invited into a life that was never going to include me. I left Whispering Pines on a clear Tuesday morning. Sophia hugged me in the parking lot and made me promise to text when I got settled. I drove back to my apartment with the windows down and the radio low. The city felt louder than I remembered, but it also felt like mine. In a way, it never had before. No one was waiting for me to explain where I had been or why I hadn't called. No one was keeping score of how much I owed them for the air I breathed. In the weeks that followed, I started saying no to things that used to feel mandatory. I stopped answering texts from old mutual friends who suddenly wanted to check in after hearing vague stories from Diane. I blocked my mother's number after the third message that alternated between "I miss you" and "Diane says you're being cruel." The silence that followed was heavy at first, then strangely light. I had spent so long filling every quiet space with the work of staying connected to her that I had forgotten what it felt like to let the quiet simply exist. The detached calm came in small moments. Making coffee without wondering if she would call and need something. Booking a weekend trip without calculating how much it would cost me in guilt later. Sitting on my own couch on a Sunday afternoon with no plans and no one to apologize to for the emptiness of my schedule. It wasn't the triumphant freedom I had imagined when I first arrived at Whispering Pines. It was quieter. It required me to live with the fact that the person who gave me life had chosen someone else's version of me over the real one, and it required me to keep choosing myself anyway. I still think about her sometimes, not the version who sat at the kitchen table with Diane, deciding I was too difficult to keep, the version who used to hum while she cooked and let me lick the spoon. That version probably never existed outside my own need to believe she was possible. Accepting that has been the hardest part of the truth. It has also been the part that finally let me put the weight down. If you've ever had to choose between the story you were raised on and the life you can actually live, you know how lonely that choice can feel. I made mine on a video call from a cabin in the hills with a woman I barely knew sitting nearby as quiet witness. I didn't get the apology. I didn't get the money. I didn't even get the satisfaction of watching my mother admit what she had done. What I got instead was the chance to stop performing for someone who had already decided the performance would never be enough. Thank you for listening to my story. It still feels strange to say out loud, but saying it has made the silence afterward feel less like loss and more like room to breathe. What would you do if the person who raised you decided you were no longer worth the effort it took to keep you close?